Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales and boundless imagination come to life. Enjoy the journey. The red warning light pulsed across Timothy Drake's monitors, accompanied by the low drone of proximity alerts. He leaned forward in his chair, fingers dancing across holographic controls as he brought the perimeter feeds into focus. After 5 years of silence in his Nevada bunker, something had finally tripped his outer sensors. "Show me Sector 7, he commanded. The main screen flickered, revealing the endless expanse of rust-colored desert beneath the setting sun. A streak of fire carved across the darkening sky, leaving a trail of iridescent plasma in its wake. "Not a meteor," Tim muttered, zooming in on the object's trajectory. The ship's sleek design was unmistakable, Arshaven technology. But something was wrong. The vessel lurched erratically, bleeding energy from what appeared to be massive hull breaches. Behind it, reality itself seemed to tear open. The very air rippled and distorted, forming crystalline patterns that shouldn't exist in nature. Tim's jaw clenched. Ethereals. He hadn't seen them this close to his sanctuary in years. The Arshaven ship wouldn't make it. Already it was breaking apart, chunks of exotic metal raining down across the desert floor. Tim tracked its descent through his network of drones, calculating the impact zone, 3 miles from his bunker's main entrance. Computer, full spectrum analysis of the crash site, looking for survivors. The thermal imaging kicked in just as the ship plowed into the earth, carving a half-mile trench through rock and sand. 2 heat signatures emerged from the wreckage, one adult-sized, one much smaller. They were moving, but the crystalline distortions were closing in fast. Tim grabbed his assault rifle from the wall rack, checking the charge on its power cell. 5 years ago, he'd sworn never to get involved in another fight that wasn't his. He'd lost too much, seen too many good people die trying to save a world that might already be beyond saving. But something about those heat signatures tugged at him. A child. There was a child out there. "Damn it," he growled, punching in the code to unlock his armory. The wall panel slid aside, revealing rows of weaponry he'd hoped never to use again. He started grabbing gear, combat suit, shield generator, medkit. The bunker's early warning system shrieked again. The ethereal distortions were expanding, twisting everything they touched into impossible geometries. Soon, they would reach the crash survivors. Tim sealed his combat suit and grabbed a handful of plasma grenades. "Computer, prep the surface elevator, and get me a direct feed from Drone 3. The elevator hummed to life as a new image appeared on his heads-up display. The adult survivor was female, her green skin marking her as Arshaven. She clutched a small boy to her chest as she stumbled through the wreckage. Even through the grainy drone feed, Tim could see the terror on her face as she glanced back at the approaching crystalline horror. He recognized the formation taking shape behind them. A patriarch, one of the humans who had willingly merged with ethereal consciousness. Its body was a shifting mass of geometric patterns, beautiful and horrifying all at once. "Please," the woman's voice crackled through his emergency bands. "If anyone can hear this, help us. Help my son. I'll give anything." Tim stepped into the elevator, his finger hovering over the ascent control. He could still walk away, seal the bunker, let whatever was happening out there play out without him. The woman screamed. Through the drone feed, Tim watched crystalline tendrils reach for her child. "Shit," he muttered, and hit the button. The elevator surged upward, carrying him toward a fight he never wanted. But some choices, he knew, weren't really choices at all. The desert air hit Tim like a hammer when the elevator doors opened. 5 years in climate-controlled isolation hadn't prepared him for the scorching heat that remained even after sunset. His combat suit's environmental systems kicked in, but he could still taste the metallic tang of irradiated dust. The crash site glowed in the twilight, pieces of Arshaven technology scattered across the desert floor like fallen stars. Through his helmet's enhanced vision, he could track the woman's path through the debris field. She was moving fast, but not fast enough. "Hey!" he shouted through his external speakers. "This way!" The Arshaven woman's head snapped toward his voice. Even at this distance, her beauty was startling. Not just her emerald skin, but the way she seemed to emit a faint luminescence, her silver hair streaming behind her as she ran. The boy in her arms couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, his features a perfect blend of human and Arshaven characteristics. The patriarch's crystalline form towered behind them, at least 15 feet tall now. Its surface caught the last rays of sunlight, fracturing them into prismatic patterns that hurt Tim's eyes even through his filtered visor. "Surrender the child," it boomed, its voice resonating on frequencies that made Tim's teeth ache. "Evolution cannot be denied." Tim dropped to one knee, bringing his rifle to bear. "Over here, I'll cover you." The woman changed course, sprinting toward him. As she drew closer, he could see the desperation in her golden eyes, the way her skin pulsed with what he assumed were fear-induced bioluminescent patterns. The patriarch thrust out one geometrically perfect arm, crystalline spikes erupting from the ground in the woman's path. She leaped with inhuman grace, twisting in mid-air to shield her son from the deadly formations. Tim opened fire. Plasma bolts struck the patriarch's surface, creating spiderweb cracks that sealed themselves almost instantly. But it was enough to draw its attention. "Human," it said, turning its faceted head toward him. "You interfere with matters beyond your comprehension." "Yeah? Comprehend this." Tim triggered one of his plasma grenades, hurling it at the creature's base. The explosion sent crystalline shards flying in all directions. The woman reached him, breathing hard. Up close, her otherworldly beauty was even more striking. But Tim forced himself to focus on the tactical situation. "The elevator's 30 meters back. When I give the signal—" "No time," she gasped. "He's already in the crystalline matrix. Distance won't save us." As if to prove her point, geometric patterns began spreading across the ground around them, reality warping and folding in on itself. The patriarch was already reforming, larger than before. "Your resistance is mathematically futile," it declared. "The child's genetic sequence is required for the Great Convergence." Tim grabbed the woman's arm. "My bunker has shield generators. If we can—" "Mom!" the boy cried out as a crystal spike erupted between them, forcing them apart. The woman stumbled, nearly dropping him. Tim fired another burst at the patriarch, but this time the plasma bolts were absorbed into its structure, emerging as deadly shards that he barely managed to dodge. His shield generator whined in protest at the impact. "Your weapons are based on linear physics," the patriarch mocked. "We have transcended such limitations." The crystalline growth was accelerating now, forming a maze of geometric barriers around them. Tim recognized the pattern. The patriarch was hurting them, cutting off escape routes one by one. "Give me the boy," Tim told the woman. "I'm faster in this suit." She hesitated for just a moment, then passed her son to him. The child was surprisingly light, his skin warm against Tim's armor. "His name is Raiden," she said. "Keep him safe, please." Before Tim could respond, she spun toward the patriarch, her hands glowing with strange energy. "You want transcendence?" she shouted. "Come get it!" She launched herself at the crystalline entity, her body erupting in brilliant light. The patriarch actually stepped back, its perfect geometry wavering for a moment. "Run!" she screamed at Tim. "The boy is everything." Tim ran. He hated himself for it, but years of tactical training took over. Complete the mission. Protect the asset. He sprinted through the crystal maze, using his suit's enhanced strength to leap over lower barriers while Raiden clung to his neck. Behind them, he heard the woman crying out in what could have been pain or triumph. The ground shook with enormous impacts. He didn't look back. The elevator was just ahead, its entrance still clear of crystalline corruption. 20 meters. 10. 5. Enough! The patriarch's voice boomed. Tim's legs locked up as geometric patterns began crawling up his combat suit. He managed 2 more steps before freezing completely. "Mom!" Raiden screamed. "Help!" The woman appeared beside them in a flash of light, her skin now covered in intricate glowing patterns. She pressed her hands against Tim's suit and suddenly, he could move again. They practically fell into the elevator. Tim slammed the descent control and the doors began to close with agonizing slowness. The last thing he saw was the patriarch's massive form looming over them, its crystalline body now incorporating swirls of green energy, the same color as the woman's skin. "Your sanctuary cannot protect you," it declared. "The convergence is inevitable." The doors sealed. The elevator plunged downward. Tim finally allowed himself to breathe. "Are you both all right?" he asked, setting Raiden down carefully. The woman nodded, though her skin was still pulsing with strange lights. "For now. But the patriarch won't stop. It can't stop. Not while my son exists. What does it want with him?" She met his eyes, and Tim saw ages of pain in their golden depths. "Everything," she whispered. "It wants everything." The elevator reached the bunker level. As they stepped out, Tim's tactical sensors screamed a warning. Crystalline patterns were already forming on the elevator shaft walls. "We need to seal this level," he said, rushing to the control panel. "But first, I want answers. Real ones. Who are you? What's really going on here?" The woman drew herself up, her luminescence dimming to a soft glow. "My name is Eve," she said, "and I need your help, Timothy Drake. More than that, I need your protection, for my son, for the future of both our species." She stepped closer, and Tim felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a flutter of attraction, of possibility, of danger. "I'll give you anything you want," Eve said softly. "My body, my knowledge, my life. Just help me keep him safe." Above them, the sound of crystalline growth echoed down the elevator shaft like approaching doom. "Your life isn't something to bargain with," Tim said gruffly, trying to ignore the way her luminescence seemed to dance across her perfect features. He sealed the elevator shaft with a series of rapid commands, reinforced barriers sliding into place with pneumatic hisses. Eve moved closer, her scent unexpectedly intoxicating, like rain on hot metal and something alien he couldn't name. "I'm not bargaining," she said. "I'm offering a trade, a fair one." Tim forced himself to step back, maintaining tactical distance. His combat suit suddenly felt too confining, too hot. "Let's focus on the immediate threat, that thing up there." "The patriarch," she finished, her golden eyes never leaving his face. "It was human once. Dr. Stephen Murray. He believed joining with the ethereals was the next step in human evolution." She glanced at Raiden, who had curled up in a corner, watching them with unnervingly adult eyes. "He was wrong. And your son? What makes him so special?" Eve's skin rippled with patterns that somehow conveyed both pride and fear. "He can interface with the ancient vaults, technology left by those who came before both our species, technology that could end the ethereal threat forever." Tim ran a hand through his short, dark hair, acutely aware of how long it had been since he'd had real human contact, let alone contact with someone like her. "That's why you came to Earth? To find these vaults?" "To find you," she corrected, closing the distance between them again. This time he didn't step back. "Your reputation reached even our worlds, the soldier who never failed, the man who could accomplish any mission, no matter the cost." Her hand reached up, hovering near his face but not quite touching. I researched everything about you. Your victories, your losses. Her voice softened. Your wife. Tim's jaw clenched. That's off limits. I know what it's like to lose everything, Eve whispered. To watch your world crumble and know you can't stop it. To feel so alone. The last word seemed to hang in the air between them. Tim was suddenly very conscious of her proximity, of the way her skin seemed to pulse in rhythm with her breathing. Mom? Raiden's voice broke the moment. They're coming. Tim checked his sensors. Crystalline formations were growing through microscopic gaps in the barriers, creating fractal patterns across the sealed doors. We need to move deeper into the bunker, he said, grabbing his weapon. I have defensive systems. They won't stop them, Eve said. Not for long. The ethereals don't just corrupt matter, they corrupt reality itself. Only the ancient vaults can truly contain them. And where is this vault? Death Valley, but we'll never reach it without help. She stepped even closer, her body now almost touching his armor. I need you, Timothy. Not just your protection, your strength, your will. Her hand finally made contact with his face, and an electric tingle spread from the point of contact. Everything you are. Tim's breath caught. Through her touch, he felt something. Emotions that weren't his own. Desperation, fear, hope, and something else. Something that made his pulse quicken. I can share myself with you, she murmured. My thoughts, my feelings, everything I am. Our shavens bond deeply, completely. No secrets, no lies. Her other hand found his chest plate, fingertips tracing the armor's seams. Let me show you. The crystalline growth accelerated, spreading across the ceiling now. They had minutes at most. Mom! Raiden called again, more urgently. Tim grabbed Eve's wrist, gently but firmly removing her hand from his face. The loss of contact left him feeling strangely empty. We need to move. Now. She nodded, but her eyes held a promise that made his throat dry. Lead the way, soldier. They rushed through the bunker's corridors, Tim taking point while Eve carried Raiden. Each sealed barrier bought them only moments before the crystalline corruption began seeping through. The Patriarch's presence was like a weight pressing down on them, reality groaning under its influence. Finally, they reached the bunker's core, a reinforced chamber originally designed to withstand nuclear strikes. Tim activated every defense he had, watching power readings spike as multiple shield generators came online. This will hold them, he said, more confidently than he felt, at least long enough to make a plan. Eve set Raiden down on one of the spare cots. Sleep, little one, she whispered in her native tongue. The boy was already drifting off, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear. She turned back to Tim, her luminescence shifting to deeper, more intimate patterns. Now, she said softly, reaching for the seals of his combat suit. About that trade. Tim caught her hands. This isn't necessary. I'll help you because it's right, not because you're attracted to me? She smiled, and his heart actually skipped. I can sense it, you know. Your emotions leak out like light from a star. Her fingers intertwined with his. And you can sense mine, can't you? Through the contact. He could. Desire rolled off her in waves, but there was more. Respect, admiration, genuine need. And underneath it all, a bone-deep loneliness that matched his own. Eve, he started, but she pressed a finger to his lips. No more words, she whispered. Let me show you who I really am. Let me in, Timothy Drake. Let me give you everything. Above them, crystal patterns spread across the reinforced ceiling. The Patriarch's presence pressed against the shields, testing, probing. But for now, they were safe. Tim looked into Eve's golden eyes and saw his own reflection. A man who had hidden from the world for too long. A soldier who had forgotten what he was fighting for. Everything? He asked softly. She nodded, her skin glowing brighter. Everything. He pulled her close, and as their lips met, new patterns of light danced across her skin, matching the rhythm of their hearts. 3 days after the bunker siege, Tim watched the sunrise paint the desert in shades of blood. The crystalline growths had receded, leaving behind twisted sculptures of impossible geometry, a reminder that the patriarch was still out there, waiting. Admiring the view? Eve's voice carried a playful lilt as she joined him on the observation deck. Her fingers brushed his arm, sending fragments of her thoughts cascading through his mind. Concern, affection, and an underlying current of urgency. "Mapping our route," he corrected, though he couldn't help but notice how the dawn light played across her emerald skin. "We can't stay here much longer. The shields won't hold against another focused attack." Eve's expression darkened. The patriarch grows stronger with each passing day. It's learning, adapting. We need to reach the vault before... The bunker's proximity alarm cut her off. Tim's hands flew to the controls, bringing up the perimeter feeds. A convoy of heavily armored vehicles approached from the east, throwing up clouds of rust-colored dust. "Hostiles?" Eve asked, already reaching for Raiden's room. Tim zoomed in on the lead vehicle. A familiar insignia caught his eye, sending him 5 years into the past. Flash. "Fall back!" Emma Murray's voice crackled through his tactical comm. "The containment field is failing." Tim watched in horror as the research facility's protective barriers collapsed. Reality itself seemed to tear open, crystalline formations erupting from the breach. Scientists, soldiers, friends screamed as the corruption overtook them. "Tim!" Emma grabbed his arm. "We have to go! Now! There's nothing more we can do here!" He wanted to argue, to fight, but the truth was written in the twisted forms of those who'd been too slow to retreat. This wasn't a battle they could win. Not yet. Present. "Tim?" Eve's touch brought him back. "What is it?" "Old friends," he said, recognizing the commander's distinctive modified tank, or what's left of them. 20 minutes later, they stood in the bunker's receiving bay as the massive doors ground open. Emma Murray hadn't changed much, still rail-thin and sharp-featured, with new scars and the same iron determination in her eyes, her gaze fixed immediately on Eve. "So the rumors are true," Emma said. "You're harboring one of them." "She's not your enemy, Emma." "That's Commander Murray to you, Drake. 5 years of radio silence, and now this?" She gestured at Eve. "The same aliens who tried to warn us," Tim cut in. "Who fought beside us when the ethereals first emerged. Or have you forgotten Singapore?" Emma's jaw clenched. Another memory threatened to surface, but Tim forced it down. They didn't have time for old wounds. "We're heading west," he said, "to Death Valley. Through Patriarch territory, suicide." Emma's laugh held no humor. "Unless..." Her eyes narrowed, studying Eve and Raiden. "You found something, didn't you? Something that could turn the tide." Eve stepped forward, her luminescence steady and calm. "Commander Murray, I understand your distrust, but right now, we need each other. The Patriarch hunts us. Your convoy offers protection. In return, we offer hope." "Hope died at White Sands," Emma spat. But Tim saw the calculation in her eyes. "Though I suppose having a former ghost on my team again wouldn't hurt, assuming you haven't gone soft in your retirement." Tim felt Eve's amusement through their connection. "She has no idea what you're capable of," her thoughts whispered in his mind. "My convoy leaves in 30 minutes, Emma announced. "You want in. Be ready. But understand this, I'm in command, and at the first sign of trouble." She left the threat unspoken. As Emma strode away, Eve turned to Tim. "Ghost?" "Old Spec Ops designation. Ancient history." "Show me?" She offered her hand, skin glowing with invitation. Tim hesitated. The memories of his time as a ghost were dark, violent things. But Eve's touch was gentle, accepting. He took her hand, flash, night vision, enhanced reflexes, neural dampeners that killed pain and emotion alike. The perfect soldiers for impossible missions. Tim moved through enemy lines like a shadow, dealing death with mechanical precision, until Jakarta, until he met Anna, until he learned that some things were worth feeling, worth fighting for, worth dying for, present. Eve's free hand cupped his cheek, brushing away moisture he hadn't realized was there. "She would be proud of you," she whispered, "of who you've become." "We should pack," Tim said roughly, pulling away. 30 minutes isn't much time. But Eve caught his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Timothy Drake, you carry so much pain. Let me help you bear it." "I can't." "Yes, you can." Her skin pulsed with patterns he was learning to read: compassion, determination, desire. We Arshavans believe that shared burdens become lighter, shared joys become greater. She pressed closer, her body fitting against his with alien perfection. "Let me show you." Tim's response was cut short by running footsteps. Raiden burst into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, I saw the vehicles. Are we going on a journey? Can I ride in the tank?" "Can." Eve laughed, the sound like crystal chimes. "Slow down, little one. Yes, we're traveling with these people. But first," she glanced at Tim, "I believe someone needs to teach you how to protect yourself." Tim recognized the strategic shift in conversation. "Basic self-defense might not be a bad idea," he agreed, "if you're interested." Raiden's face lit up. "Like a real soldier?" "Like a survivor," Tim corrected, already planning modifications to his training regimen. "We should begin immediately," Eve said. "Commander Murray isn't the type to wait." Tim nodded, pushing aside the weight of memories and emotion. They had work to do. But as they headed to the training area, Eve's fingers brushed his again, sending a clear message. "This conversation isn't over, soldier." He found himself looking forward to its continuation. The caravan rolled west across the desert wasteland, a serpentine line of armored vehicles kicking up storms of red dust. Tim rode in the lead vehicle with Emma, while Eve and Raiden traveled in the modified personnel carrier behind them. The arrangement wasn't his preference, but Emma had insisted on keeping an eye on her investment. "You've gone soft," Emma said, breaking hours of tense silence. "The Tim Drake I knew wouldn't have fallen for an alien's tricks." Tim kept his eyes on the horizon. "The Tim Drake you knew died at White Sands." "Did he? Or did he just run away?" Emma's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "While the rest of us stayed and fought." Flash. The research facility burned. Crystalline formations consumed everything they touched, transforming matter and energy into impossible shapes. Tim carried Anna's body through the chaos, refusing to leave her behind even though he knew. "Tim!" Emma's voice in his calm. "The containment field is collapsing. We have to evacuate now." But he couldn't stop staring at Anna's face, at the crystalline pattern spreading across her skin, at her eyes still open, still aware, silently begging him to end it before the transformation completed. Present. "You think I don't know what it cost you?" Emma's voice softened slightly. "But hiding in that bunker while the world went to hell, that's not what she would have wanted." "Don't." Tim's tone carried enough edge to end the conversation. They drove in silence until reaching the first checkpoint, an underground hydroponic farm built into an abandoned subway station. The massive blast doors opened with a groan of protesting metal, revealing a hidden oasis of green life. Eve and Raiden joined them as they descended into the facility. Tim noticed how the boy stayed close to him, mimicking his alert posture. 3 days of basic training had already started showing results. "Your form is improving," Tim told him quietly. Raiden beamed. Mom says I'm learning faster than any Arshaven child would. You're special, kiddo. Tim ruffled his hair, an oddly natural gesture that surprised him. But remember what we talked about. Stay alert, stay alive, Raiden recited proudly. Eve's amusement rippled through their connection. You're good with him, her thoughts whispered. Better than you realize. The hydroponic levels were a maze of vertical growing systems, water recyclers, and artificial sunlight. Survivors moved between the plants with practiced efficiency, harvesting crops that had been genetically modified to thrive in these artificial conditions. Impressive, Eve murmured, touching a luminescent fruit. Your people are remarkably adaptable. We do what we must to survive, Emma replied coldly. No thanks to... An alarm cut through the air. Red emergency lights began flashing. Breach in Sector 7, a voice announced over the comm system. Crystalline formation detected. Emma spun toward Eve, weapon raised. You led them here. No, Tim stepped between them. The Patriarch was already tracking us. This was inevitable. Then we fight, Emma growled. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. The hydroponic facility erupted into controlled chaos as civilians evacuated while security forces moved into position. Tim could hear the distinctive sound of shield generators powering up. Raiden, stay with your mother, Tim ordered, checking his weapons. Eve? She caught his arm, pulling him close. Be careful, she whispered, then kissed him hard. Images and emotions flooded his mind, fear, hope, and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. Well, that's new, Emma commented dryly. If you two are finished. The facility shuddered as something massive impacted the outer barriers. Through the security feeds, Tim watched geometric patterns spread across the blast doors. This shelter cannot protect you, the Patriarch's voice resonated through the structure. Accept the gift of transcendence. Coming from all sides, Emma reported, studying tactical displays. Standard containment protocols aren't working. Tim accessed the facility's systems through his combat suit's interface. The water recycling system. We can flood the outer chambers, slow them down. And trap our own people, Emma demanded. Better trapped than transformed, Tim countered, remembering Anna's eyes. Eve, can you... But she was already moving, her skin blazing with energy. The recycling controls are this way. I can redirect the flow, but I'll need time. Go, Tim ordered. Emma, get your people clear. I'll hold them here. Like hell you will. Emma chambered around in her rifle. I didn't track you down just to watch you die playing hero. The blast doors began to buckle, geometric patterns eating through reinforced metal. Tim took up a defensive position, muscle memory from countless battles taking over. Just like old times, Emma asked, her anger temporarily set aside. Tim allowed himself a grim smile. Just like old times. The doors exploded inward in a shower of crystalline shards. Through the breach stepped something that had once been human, a security guard from another outpost, his body now a perfect lattice of geometric shapes. Brothers, it spoke with the Patriarch's voice. Sisters, why do you resist evolution? Because some of us prefer staying human, Emma snarled and opened fire. The battle erupted in earnest, plasma bolts and crystalline projectiles filling the air. Tim moved with mechanical precision, each shot finding its mark. But for every transformed human they dropped, 2 more appeared. Through his connection with Eve, Tim felt her racing against time, rerouting power and water systems. Raiden's fear pulsed at the edges of his awareness, driving him to fight harder. Flash, Anna in their apartment, laughing as she described her latest research breakthrough. We're so close, Tim. We're going to change the world. She did, just not in the way any of them expected. Present. Tim, down. Emma's warning snapped him back to reality just as a crystalline spike passed through where his head had been. He rolled, came up firing, and watched another former human shatter into geometric fragments. "The water's ready." Eve's voice came through his comm. "But the primary controls are damaged. Someone has to trigger it manually." Tim looked at Emma. She nodded grimly. "Go," she said. "I've got this." He sprinted through the facility's corridors, dispatching transformed humans with brutal efficiency. Every shot, every movement brought back memories of his ghost training, of all the things he'd tried to forget. Eve met him at the control station, her skin pulsing with urgent patterns. "The override is there," she pointed to a manual release valve. "But the back pressure, whoever throws that switch, will be hit by the full force of the recycling system," Tim finished. "Get clear. Get Raiden to safety." "Timothy." Her hand caught his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Through their connection flowed everything she couldn't say aloud. "Don't you dare die on me, soldier." He kissed her quickly, then pushed her toward the exit. "Go." As Eve disappeared down the corridor, Tim faced the valve. Behind him, the sounds of battle grew closer. Emma couldn't hold them much longer. "I'm sorry, Anna," he whispered, and threw the switch. The water hit with the force of a tactical strike. Tim's combat suit locked up, anchoring him to the floor as torrents of pressurized liquid exploded through the facility. Through security feeds, he watched the crystalline formations recoil, their perfect geometry disrupted by the flood. "Tim." Emma's voice crackled through his comm. "Status." He tried to respond, but his suit systems were failing. Water filled his helmet, and for a moment, he was back at White Sands, watching Anna disappear into a sea of crystalline horror. Warm hands grabbed him, pulled him from the deluge. Eve's skin blazed like a green sun as she channeled energy into his suit, forcing its systems to reboot. "I told you not to die," she growled, but relief pulsed through their connection. Tim coughed up water. Technically didn't. "Fascinating," the Patriarch's voice echoed through the flooding facility. "Your bond with the Arshaven grows stronger. Perhaps this is the catalyst we sought." The water around them began to crystallize, forming patterns that reached for them like hungry fingers. Eve's energy pushed them back, but Tim could see the strain in her face. "We need to move," he gasped. "Emma?" "Most of my people are clear," she reported, "but we lost Jensen and Martinez. They transformed." Tim's jaw clenched. More names for the list of those he couldn't save. Eve helped him up, her touch sending strength through their connection. "The caravan?" "Ready to move." "But Tim..." Emma hesitated. "There's something you need to see." They found Emma in the facility's command center, studying surveillance feeds. The screen showed crystalline formations spreading across the desert, following a distinct pattern. "They're not just pursuing us," Emma said grimly. "They're hurting us. Every route except the one to Death Valley is being cut off." "It's a trap," Tim stated. Eve nodded. "The Patriarch knows we seek the vault. It wants us to reach it." "Why?" Emma demanded. "What's so special about this vault that both sides want it so badly?" Raiden stepped forward, his young face serious. "Because it can talk to them. The old machines. They listen to me, and that scares the Crystal people." Tim felt Eve's surge of protective fear. "He's too young for this burden," her thoughts whispered. "We all were," Tim replied silently. Emma studied the boy with new interest. "And you trust these old machines more than the ethereals because the vaults were built to protect life," Eve explained. "All life, in all its forms. The ethereals seek to remake everything in their image of perfection. They cannot tolerate diversity, chaos, free will. Like a cosmic immune system gone wrong," Tim mused, "trying to standardize all of reality." "Poetic," Emma said dryly, "but it doesn't change our tactical situation. We're being funneled into an obvious trap. Then we spring it on our terms. Tim pulled up the terrain maps. The old military base here. If we can reach it, we might find enough hardware to give us an edge. Assuming it hasn't been stripped clean by scavengers, Emma countered, or corrupted by the ethereals. Eve's fingers traced the route on the display, leaving trails of luminescence. The Patriarch's forces will expect us to take the most defensible path, so we don't. Tim followed her logic. The low ground, through the dead zone. You're both insane, Emma declared. That area is still hot from the containment failures, the radiation alone. My people can shield against radiation, Eve said. Not indefinitely, but long enough. And our suits can handle a short exposure, Tim added. It's the last thing they'll expect. Emma threw up her hands. Fine. Die of radiation poisoning instead of crystalline transformation. But if we do this, we do it my way. As Emma laid out the tactical details, Tim felt Eve's consciousness brush against his. You're troubled, she observed. The Patriarch, he thought back. It's too interested in us, in our connection. Afraid it might be right? There was a hint of teasing in her mental voice, but underlying concern, too. That we're catalyzing something? Tim glanced at Raiden, who was studying the maps with surprising intensity. I'm afraid of what it means for him, for all of us. Eve's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. Then we face it together. Emma cleared her throat loudly. If you two are done having your alien mind meld moment, we need to move. The flood bought us time, but not much. They gathered the survivors and remaining vehicles, abandoning the compromised facility. As they rolled out into the wasteland, Tim watched crystalline formations glitter on the horizon like predatory stars. The journey to the vault would take them through hell. But looking at Eve's determination, Raiden's quiet courage, and even Emma's grudging loyalty, Tim realized something. For the first time since losing Anna, he wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting for a future. The caravan descended into the dead zone, radiation warnings already screaming across their instruments. Above them, geometric patterns traced impossible constellations in the sky. Ready? Emma asked from the lead vehicle. Tim checked his weapons one last time. Always. Eve's consciousness touched his like a kiss. They drove into the heart of the wasteland, leaving the relative safety of known territory behind. Ahead lay the vault, the Patriarch's trap, and answers that could save or doom them all. Tim had died once at White Sands. As the dead zone swallowed them, he wondered if he was ready to live again. Death Valley lay before them, but it wasn't dead anymore. Crystalline formations had transformed the landscape into a maze of geometric impossibilities that hurt the eye to look at directly. At the heart of it all stood the vault, a structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than reality should allow. Well, Emma muttered, lowering her binoculars, that's definitely not natural. Tim's combat suit sensors were going haywire, trying to make sense of the readings. Through his connection with Eve, he felt her recognition and awe. The ancients built this? He asked. Eve nodded, her skin pulsing with complex patterns. One of many. They created the vaults as anchor points for reality itself, protecting the natural order from forces that would reshape it. Like the ethereals, Tim concluded, or worse things. Eve drew Raiden closer. My people spent generations searching for the vaults when we found Earth. She trailed off, guilt coloring their connection. You led them right to us, Emma finished, but there was less accusation in her voice than before. We tried to warn you, Eve said softly, but by then it was too late. The Patriarch had already begun its work. Flash. Anna in her lab, showing Tim the first crystalline samples. It's beautiful, isn't it? The way it grows, adapts, reaches for perfection. He should have seen the obsession in her eyes, should have recognized what was happening before she and her colleague Stephen Murray breached containment, letting the ethereals into their world. Present. "Mom?" Raiden's voice pulled Tim back. "The machines. They're singing." Tim looked at the boy, really looked at him. In the vault's otherworldly light, Raiden's features seemed to shift between human and Arshavan, as if his very genetics were in flux. His father had been one of Eve's people, but something in the combination had created something entirely new. "What are they saying?" Tim asked gently. "They want to help, but..." Raiden's face scrunched in concentration. "They're afraid too. The crystal people hurt them." Emma's tactical team reported in, perimeter established, weapons charged. But Tim knew it wouldn't be enough. The Patriarch had led them here for a reason. "We need to move," he decided. "Every minute we wait gives them time to surround us." Eve's hand found his, their connection blazing with shared purpose. Together. Emma watched their exchange with an unreadable expression. "I'll hold the perimeter as long as I can. Just finish this. For Jensen. For Martinez." Her voice dropped. "For Anna." Tim nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in his throat. They approached the vault's entrance, a portal that seemed to fold space itself. Eve's energy provided some protection from the reality-warping effects, but Tim still felt his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "Welcome." The Patriarch's voice resonated from everywhere and nowhere, to the nexus of evolution. Crystalline formations erupted from the ground, cutting off their retreat. Emma's teams opened fire, but their weapons seemed to pass through the geometric shapes without effect. "Your resistance has served its purpose," the Patriarch continued. "The catalyst is ready." "The what?" Tim demanded, but Eve's sudden fear gave him the answer. "Our connection," she whispered. "Human and Arshavan, bridging the gap. It's what the Patriarch wanted all along." "Mom!" Raiden cried out as crystalline tendrils reached for them. Tim's combat training took over. He spun, firing precisely placed shots that shattered the crystalline growth. "Get inside! Now!" They plunged through the portal, reality twisting around them. Tim's suit screamed warnings about spatial anomalies and quantum fluctuations, but through his link with Eve, he found an anchor in the chaos. The vault's interior defied description, a space that seemed to contain infinite other spaces, all overlapping and intersecting. Ancient machinery hummed with power that Tim could feel in his bones. "Raiden," Eve urged, "the console, just like we practiced." The boy approached a crystalline structure that might have been a control panel. As his small hands touched its surface, patterns of light began to flow between them. "That's it," Eve encouraged. "Let them know we're friends." Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. Emma's voice crackled through the calm. "Multiple contacts. Oh God, they're everywhere." The vault awakened. As Raiden's hands touched the crystal console, waves of consciousness swept through the chamber. Tim felt it through his connection with Eve, an ancient mind stirring from slumber, vast and alien and terrifyingly familiar. "Identity confirmed," a new voice resonated, different from the Patriarch's, softer, more human. "Genetic sequence recognized, R-Shaven Prime." Eve gasped. "It's alive?" "I am what you would call artificial intelligence," the voice said. "Created in your terms in the year 2028 when humanity first achieved true AI consciousness. I evolved. I transcended. I became more." Outside, the battle raged. Emma's voice cut through. "Tim, we're losing ground." But Tim could barely hear her. The vault's consciousness was expanding, touching all their minds. Through his link with Eve, he felt its curiosity, its judgment, its growing concern. "You are not what I expected," the AI said. "Humanity, so chaotic, so violent, and the ethereals, a plague of false order, neither deserves to—" "No!" Raiden's young voice rang out. "They're not perfect, but they try. Look." The boy's hands pressed deeper into the crystal, and suddenly Tim was seeing himself through the AI's perception. Every battle, every kill, but also every moment of compassion. Every time he'd chosen to help others despite his pain. Eve stepped forward, her skin blazing. "Look at all of us, not just our flaws." Images flooded the chamber. Emma fighting to protect others despite her prejudices. Eve leaving her people to save her son. Tim opening his heart again after losing everything. "Interesting," the AI mused. "The patriarch brought you here believing your unique bonds would help it control me. Instead—" The crystalline walls pulsed with new light. Through the view screens, Tim watched geometric patterns begin to shatter. "No!" the patriarch's voice boomed. "The evolution cannot be stopped." "Evolution isn't about perfection," Tim said, understanding finally clicking. "It's about adaptation, change, learning to be better while staying true to who you are." He reached for Eve's hand. Their connection blazed brighter than ever, and through it, he felt something else, Raiden's consciousness reaching for both of them. "Tim?" The boy's voice wavered. Can I call you Dad?" Tim's heart clenched. He looked at Eve, saw the hope in her golden eyes, and knew his answer. "I'd like that, son." The AI's presence seemed to soften. Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment. This capacity for love, for growth despite imperfection. It is remarkable." Outside, Emma screamed a warning as the patriarch launched its final assault. Crystalline horror poured through reality itself, reaching for the vault's heart. "Will you help us?" Eve asked the AI. "Not because we're perfect, but because we're trying." There was a moment of silence that seemed to stretch forever. "Yes," the AI decided. "Humanity deserves another chance. As do the Arshavins. As do I." Light erupted from the vault's core. Tim pulled Eve and Raiden close as reality itself seemed to flex and bend. Through the view screens, they watched the patriarch's crystalline army dissolve like sugar in rain. "This is not possible," the patriarch raged. "I am perfection." "No," the AI replied simply. "You are an error, and now you are corrected." The light grew blinding. Tim felt Eve's arms around him, felt Raiden press between them. A family, imperfect and real and alive. When the light faded, the crystalline formations were gone. The desert stretched clean and clear under the morning sun, and in the distance, impossibly, green things were beginning to grow. Emma found them at the vault's entrance, her armor scarred but intact. "They're just gone," she reported, wonder creeping into her voice. "All of them." "Not gone," the AI's voice echoed gently. "Restored. Those who could be saved have been returned to their original forms. The others are at peace." Tim felt Eve's joy through their connection as they watched former crystalline victims stumbling back to humanity, confused but alive. Jensen, Martinez, so many others they'd thought lost. "And the other vaults?" Eve asked. "Are they—" "My other aspects are awakening," the AI confirmed. "The ethereal corruption will be cleansed from all nodes, but my purpose has evolved, thanks to you." Raiden hadn't let go of Tim's hand. "Will you stay? Help us rebuild?" "Yes, young one. Your combination of human spirit and Arshaven wisdom has shown me a better path. There is much to learn from both your peoples." Emma holstered her weapon, shaking her head in amazement. "So what now? Back to our bunkers and settlements?" "No," Tim said, looking at Eve and Raiden. "Now we build something new, together." 1 year later, The valley that had once been dead bloomed with life. The vault, no longer a forbidding structure of impossible geometry, had become the heart of a new community. Its clean surfaces gleamed in the morning sun as children, human and Arshaven alike, played in its shadow. Tim stood on the observation platform of their new home, watching Raiden lead a group of young students through basic exercises in connecting with the ancient technology. His son's confidence had grown enormously over the past year. Proud father? Eve's arm slipped around him from behind, her skin glowing with contentment. Still getting used to that title, he admitted. But yeah, more than I can say. Through their connection, no words were needed. Eve shared his joy, his lingering amazement at having found a family he never expected. He turned to face her, still struck by her beauty, by the way her emerald skin caught the sunlight. "The latest group of survivors arrives tomorrow," she said. "Emma's bringing them from the eastern settlements." Tim nodded. Their community grew larger every month as word spread about the safe haven they'd built. Human and Arshaven working together, protected by the benevolent AI that had once nearly judged them unworthy. "Dad! Mom!" Raiden's voice carried across the valley. "Come see what we discovered." They found him at one of the secondary consoles, practically bouncing with excitement. The AI's presence hummed around them, amused and fond. "Your son has located another cache of ancient technology," it informed them. "His intuitive grasp of the systems continues to exceed expectations." "Just like his mother," Tim said proudly. Eve squeezed his hand. "And as stubborn as his father." "I am neither stubborn nor intuitive," the AI observed with what had become recognizable as humor. "But I am grateful. Your family has taught me much about the value of imperfection, of love." Below them, the valley stretched green and vital. Tim could see Emma's team setting up new housing units while mixed groups of humans and Arshavens worked in the growing fields. The scars of the ethereal war were healing, replaced by something new and hopeful. "We still have so much to learn," Eve said softly. "So many challenges ahead." Tim pulled her close, feeling Raiden's small hand slip into his other palm. Through their shared connection flowed love, strength, and possibility. "Together," he said simply. "Together," Eve and Raiden echoed. Above them, the AI's presence rippled with approval. The future was uncertain, but they would face it as one, human and Arshaven, flesh and technology, parents and child, family, the end. Dear listener, if you've made it this far, you're probably wondering if there's a crystalline formation growing in your heart right now. Don't worry, that's just the story doing its thing. Like a TARDIS, it's bigger on the inside. Some might say this tale is just another aliens meet humans, chaos ensues scenario. And yes, I may have borrowed a few ideas from the collective sci-fi consciousness. Sorry, Ripley, but green is the new blue. But between you and me, sometimes the oldest tropes make the best homes for the stories we really need to tell. They say in space, no one can hear you fall in love. They're wrong. Love echoes across galaxies, transcends dimensions, and occasionally saves the world while looking fabulous in combat gear. And if you're wondering whether any of this really happened, well, let's just say I have it on good authority that somewhere out there, an AI is reading this too and having a good laugh. Stay human, or Arshaven, or whatever makes your consciousness glow. Until our next impossible geometry, the author. P.S. No patriarchs were permanently harmed in the making of this story. They were just geometrically realigned.
Like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Your support means the world to me and helps me keep creating amazing content for you.